So, the ascent of Stripe is one of the most amazing success stories in the payments industry. When Patrick Collison, the company's co-founder, delivered Stripe's first keynote on this very stage in 2013, the company hadn't even raised $100 million in total. Just last month, Stripe raised $245 million in a single round, raising its valuation to a pretty astounding $20 billion. When we think of revolutionary change, it's hard to go past the e-commerce and online arena. But Stripe has recognized that the real transformative potential of the internet isn't to move offline commerce online, but rather to enable the creation of entirely new businesses that don't even exist yet. Today, it is our pleasure to welcome to Money 2020 for the first time, Stripe's Chief Operating Officer, Claire Hughes-Johnson. Responsible for scaling Stripe's worldwide business operations to meet the needs of its rapidly growing user base, Claire brings nearly 20 years of experience in sales, product marketing, and operational scaling to Stripe. She has led various product and operations teams at Google, managed global mid-market sales for AdWords, as well as business teams for Gmail, Google Checkout, and Google Apps. Let's welcome Claire as she explores the types of companies driving real growth and jobs globally, how the internet is evolving from advertising-led to commerce-led, and why micro-platforms will have a macro-size impact in the coming years. Ladies and gentlemen, Claire Hughes-Johnson of Stripe.
Hello, everybody. It's fabulous to be here. As Chloe said, I'm the COO of Stripe, and you probably know us well for the work we do in online payments. I think of it as building the commerce infrastructure for the internet, and I'm really honored that Money 2020 invited me to be here. I'm just going to try that again. So what I want to talk about is where we are today, which is at last year's Money 2020 in Asia, Will Gabrick, our CFO, shared that we serve hundreds of thousands of businesses around the world. Today we serve more than 1 million businesses, including some of the most popular and high-growth companies, Spotify, Uber, Salesforce, many others. More than 80% of American adults bought at least one item through Stripe last year. And we now handle over 200 million API requests every day, peaking at more than 10,000 requests a second. And this is what programmable money movement looks like. It's about applying technology to build a new kind of infrastructure for payments. Stripe's mission, as you may have heard, is to increase the GDP of the internet. And while that may sound a little wonky, it's actually a very important economy. In fact, over the past 25 years, this online economy has grown 1,500x from less than $1 billion in 1995 to more than $1.5 trillion today. And during this time, the internet has produced 7 of the top 10 global companies by market cap, and online commerce is growing twice as fast as offline. And yet, looked at another way, the internet has barely taken off. Today, it accounts for only 5% of global commerce overall, and only about 3% of the global GDP. Most people don't believe that number, but it's true. Think about the GDP of the internet and what this really represents. There's a long way to go to realize the amount of commerce that occurs offline, online. And I think the urgency to do this is much higher than people understand. A truly commerce-based internet means brand new tech businesses and new jobs. It means real economic growth. The GDP of the internet is a marker not just of innovation, but also of the future economy itself. What might that new online economy look like? Let's start with the GDP of the current US economy. If we use a rough proxy, the largest US companies by top-line revenue, you can see a diversity of industries represented here: automotive, manufacturing, pharma, healthcare, energy, and more. Incidentally, advertising isn't even a blip on this chart because it accounts for somewhere between 0.5% and 1% of the overall GDP. Now let's imagine for a minute that the US internet economy is a standalone country, similar to the chart I showed before. If you broke out the largest internet companies in the US by revenue, and you broke it out by industry, it would look something like this. And if you remove Amazon, the breakout is even more stark. Yes, the largest internet companies in the US and really the world, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters, are principally commercial conduits of advertising dollars. And even Amazon is increasingly a player in advertising as well, with nearly $5 billion in digital ad revenue reported in their last earnings report, putting them at number 3. The GDP of the internet is dominated by advertising. When I started at Google back in the early 2000s, I was encouraged, actually, by how much internet advertising was helping businesses reach new customers. I met advertisers and I'd ask them, how many jobs have you added thanks to new customers or new sales brought to you by AdWords? And it was encouraging. There were companies like a small property rental company in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, or a woman I met in Singapore who'd built an online beauty business from basically nothing and was actually hiring tens and hundreds of employees when I left Google. I really believed that search and display ads would democratize the internet and help businesses of all sizes scale and grow. But what really happened is that online advertising took hold, but online commerce didn't follow. There are a number of reasons for that. I think the lack of the payments infrastructure for the internet is one of them. But I think another reason is that the online economy is so much driven by consumer attention coupled with advertising consolidation. Today, nearly 50% of global ad spending is controlled by 2 companies, Google and Facebook. Early on, attracting new customers through online advertising was inexpensive and accessible to most businesses. Today, people and businesses are being priced out, as the cost per impression has grown by nearly 100% in the last year alone. And in search, smaller companies attempting to buy keywords are increasingly bid out of the market. When the internet began, companies had hundreds of options to place their ads across the publishers on the web, ranging from standalone websites to advertising networks. Today, the number of advertising networks on which those publishers participate has shrunk steadily. The average number of networks and exchanges used by US advertisers is now down to just under 6, a 25% decrease in the last 2 years alone. So publishers have fewer choices from where to get their ads. And the internet economy's dependence on consumer attention and advertising has brought enormous changes to our society. I think the last few years have demonstrated that very clearly. And there's a real dark side to those changes. When the currency of an economy is user data, and their attention, what happens when it's abused? I mean, first, obviously, is privacy issues. Many consumers are just not aware of how much they give up of their data and their privacy for free internet services. Paying with your personal data definitely brings some benefits, but the pressures of tighter and tighter ad targeting and the wide reach of the internet are a dangerous combustible combination. It was only a matter of time before we saw the kinds of breaches, and to some people, the abuses that are dominating headlines today. Second is a gap emerging between consumers that have to give up their personal info for access to the internet versus those who do not. I'm talking about some countries in the world where either the telco or in some cases Facebook or Google is the only way you can get online. Ad-supported access models are forcing consumers simply to use those services to get internet access. And people outside of those markets don't have to pay as much of this price. People in the US, we have some ad-free and some privacy-protected alternatives. But this is real access inequality. It's the very definition of a Faustian bargain. And finally, the actions meant to combat the ill effects of this use of consumer data, the advertising concentration, has led to a reduction in innovation overall. Many of us in this room have probably worried about the impact of GDPR, PSD2, SCA coming soon, and the like. But larger incumbents can weather these expensive and complex regulations more easily. Ironically, the laws meant to rein them in are stifling new business innovation. It's incredibly concerning. So what are we going to do about the growing power of these large, concentrated digital incumbents? How do we make the leap from an advertising economy based on consumer attention to a commerce economy based on products, services that customers want, a true value-based economy? The payoff to that economy is economic growth. It's about job creation. So I want to talk a little bit about that. It's actually a fairly common belief, a cliche really at this point, that small businesses create the most jobs and growth. It's been used in every State of the Union since Reagan. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy. What you might not realize is that this point of view stems from a book in the late 1970s by an MIT economist named David Birch. Coming out of the post-World War II boom, large firms were considered the drivers of growth, and Birch's research really shook up the status quo. It showed that from 1969 to 1976, companies with 100 or fewer employees created more than 80% of new employment. That's where the idea took off. If you read, probably today, the Small Business Administration's website, you will see the stat, 80% of jobs are created by small businesses. But what Birch later realized, and even corrected in a subsequent book in the 1990s, was that not all small businesses are alike. There's a big difference between the coffee shop on the corner and a tech company in the cloud. If you factor in age of the business, as the National Bureau of Economic Research did in 2010, and the Kauffman Foundation did in 2011 using a new longitudinal data set, you can quickly see that the startups, that's the top of this chart, above the line where job creation, create the most net new jobs in the US economy. The existing firms are that bottom darker blue line. In fact, without the startups, there would have been no net new job creation at all. And these small but powerful engines are not traditional SMBs, but they're new tech companies, increasingly founded and led by developers. Early on, Stripe realized the importance of enabling these developers. Really, we're a company that started building developer tools. We learned what they needed, a subscription logic product, which became our billing offering, which now handles invoices as well. To manage complex funds flows for marketplaces, for platforms that support platforms, became our Connect product. To also accept payments in the physical world and, of course, our core product in the online world. To issue credit cards via code for, say, a food delivery startup where the person picking up the food needs to pay. You could have a one-time card that works for that purchase. A prepaid card, gas card for drivers in a ride-sharing environment. That is our issuing product. To run analytics on all of these transactions and be able to reconcile with your financial systems. That is our Sigma product. And to prevent fraud across all of these products, Radar. This, in total, is our global payments and treasury network. Easy to use, easy for a developer to integrate, and entirely programmable. But to grow the GDP of the internet, we need the infrastructure, but we need new businesses of all sizes, not just new versions of today's tech giants. And that's where platforms come in. As Bill Gates famously said, a platform is when the economic value of everybody that uses it exceeds the value of the company that creates it. Then it's a platform. Ben Thompson at Stratechery calls this quote the Bill Gates line. That's because it's both a quote and a line in the sand between companies who are platforms and those that are really just aggregators, say, of advertising dollars and consumer attention. Companies on one side of the line siphon away the majority of dollars into their ecosystems, and the price of doing business is the access to those networks. Companies on the other side of the line provide stepping stones for entirely new businesses to be created. They allow strong and durable businesses to be built on top of their infrastructure. These are the real platforms that will build the internet economy. One of the most exciting applications of Stripe's global payments and treasury network is the rise of platforms that run on top of Stripe. You've probably heard of Postmates, or Booking.com, or Shopify. All of them run on Stripe and are platforms for other businesses. But what about smaller, more unknown platforms? Jisoo, a platform that helps Chinese restaurants automate their marketing and delivery to consumers. Red Awning, one of the largest vacation rental networks globally. Amplicare, probably never heard of this company, but they build software for mom and pop pharmacies, for pharmacies that exist outside of the huge chains, to address complex regulations and optimize patient care. FreightView, a virtual shipping platform that helps small business manufacturers save 10 to 15% on every shipment. Think of a small business, they don't have the volume to get the savings. FreightView helps deliver those savings. And these are micro platforms. There are many, many other examples built on Stripe. They provide the infrastructure, the tools, the software that helps the SMBs compete and innovate against the entrenched players. There are thousands of them fostering businesses online for traditional industries today. And they're also increasingly vertical, as you can see here. They represent, to me, the growing long tail of internet commerce, helping SMBs become more tech-enabled so they can compete, survive, and grow. This is where jobs are created, both by the tech platform and for the SMBs that rely on that platform. So, as we grapple with the realities of what the advertising economy has created, an economy that is now morphed into what some call the attention economy, I think it's important to remember that our time isn't free. And money consolidated into the hands of a few players has really led to unintended consequences. The internet should be an equalizing force, a diverse and vibrant place that allows for innovation no matter who you are, what size your business is, or what country you live in. Moving from the attention economy to the value economy will not be easy. It doesn't just happen. Stripe believes very strongly in the contingency of progress. The unification of many forces in the ecosystem will need to be harnessed. We all have a role to play. Many of the people in this room today have a big role to play. The time has come to grow the GDP of the internet together. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. What an amazing day it's been so far. Day one of Money 2020, and we're nearly there.